What vision and power and beauty and talent, Jeremy.
Thank you.
This is such a pleasure and an honor to be here and to have this conversation with you. It was several years ago when we first met, and you were just starting.
Yeah.
You were just starting Black Iris. Yeah. You had this idea. You were going out. You were doing it all on your own, pushing it forward. And now we're sitting here at Google, and you are preparing for the world premiere of A Mother's Rite.
Yeah.
Tell us about this journey.
It's been full of challenges, but it's been very fulfilling in so many ways that I hadn't even ever imagined. I've always loved dancing and creating my own dances in my bedroom as a child, and to be able to see my work being performed on stages like the Kennedy Center, it's just been very humbling.
And the Kennedy Center, you mentioned that because that was April 2017.
Yeah.
And I believe a principal dancer somehow noticed what you were doing. How did that happen?
Misty Copeland invited us personally to come and present Madiba on her program for a week long at the Kennedy Center. I recall the day that I got the email from the Kennedy Center that they were considering my work and that Misty Copeland had given them my name. I actually thought it was junk mail. I was sitting down in a meeting, a very intense meeting, and I noticed this email that I had from the Kennedy Center, and I was like, why am I getting junk mail from the Kennedy Center? I've never even seen a show there. How did this happen? So I just so happened to open it, and it said something along the lines of, your ballet about Nelson Mandela at the Kennedy Center for a week, live orchestra, and I was just like, I immediately started crying. I hadn't even finished choreographing the ballet yet. And there was already a lot of buzz about what I was doing and the change that I've been trying to make. So it was really rewarding and so humbling that Misty Copeland was so generous to recommend me for this opportunity.
And so you've been there at the Kennedy Center, and then you're going to be at Marcus Garvey Park,
Yes.
which is free and open, 1,600 seats.
Yeah.
Hopefully filling many of those, if not all. And so part of your mission is about audience and about who you bring in. But before we get to that, I just want to ask you more about A Mother's Rite and how that came about. I had the pleasure of seeing the rehearsal at the Bronx Museum, and there was a moment when a woman stood up from the audience during the Q&A and said, "You've told my story to you."
Yeah.
Which she then went on to say that her son had been killed. Mm-hmm. And how do you work to create a project that has that kind of effect?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that. Guts, I guess. A lot of faith and trust in my journey. A Mother's Rite was something, one of my composition teachers, Kazuko Hirabayashi, who has been a mentor for me to me for many years, always wanted me to use Rite of Spring. As part of our college courses, she was like, why don't you try choreographing this music? And I was like, no way, are you kidding me? So many choreographers have choreographed to it on the most iconic of levels, and the music is extremely complicated to hear, to count musically. And so I just always kind of pushed it away, but at this point in my career, I started to feel like I wanted to push myself. I feel like the only way that we can grow as individuals is if we put ourselves in uncomfortable positions. And so just looking at the music and listening to the intonation of the melodies and how sharp and strong certain moments were in the music, and then also thinking about Black culture and Black history today, I was trying to find a way to connect the two things together. And as I started to dig a little bit more into the original story for Rite of Spring, which was a ritual sacrifice within a pagan Russian village, I started to see a little bit of similarities within the sacrifices that are happening within the Black community, not necessarily willingly, but the sacrifices of the mothers essentially turning a new leaf and taking on a new life as a champion for their sons and daughters that have been killed senselessly.
And there's certainly a lot to be mad about in this society, but you, Courtney Celeste Spears talks about the power and the strength of the mother. but also anger was a component.
Absolutely.
And I heard you mention Solange in the concert, Right to be Mad.
Yeah.
How did that affect you?
So the day, I wouldn't say it was the day before my boyfriend and I went to the Solange concert at Radio City Music Hall, I had a sit down with an advisor of mine, and we talked about this ballet that I had been developing and working on for about 6 months prior. And it originally started out as a chess game, kind of a white versus black sort of thing, but I really wanted to put it in a chess game format so that we could see all the characters and players within these two sides. But we were having this conversation, and he was just like, something's missing here. It doesn't feel like we're pushing culture forward. It doesn't feel revolutionary or unique and different. And so he challenged me to kind of take a moment to sit back and dig a little bit deeper. And I'm so grateful that I did. I went to the Solange concert that night with my boyfriend, and I like to engulf myself in whatever experience that I'm in. So a lot of my work is either inspired by something that I'm going through or just the observations of those around me. And so I was really captivated by how people were so engulfed in Solange and her concert. I mean, people were taking pictures and videos, and for me it was like, okay, their attention's here on her. What do people that go to the Solange concert, how can they connect with her? And they were really connected to a moment that she was having a nervous breakdown on stage. She has this song called Mad, and she talks about, I've got the right to be mad, and she kept saying that over and over and over again. I started to look around, and I started to think, what do we have the right to be mad about? And I started to think about, the senseless killings of men and women, but more specifically about the mothers and how we often don't get to hear their side of what they're going through. We often hear of them talking about what has happened, and they are fighting for justice for their child, but we don't often get to see that grieving process. So this new ballet, it evaluates a number of stages of grief, and the ballet starts when the mother is coming home from the final court trial where she finds out the gentleman was acquitted of all charges. And so it's kind of that process of, okay, now the cameras are gone, we've moved on to the next trial, but that mother still has to live with this forever. And so we kind of get to have a microscope look at her healing process and how she continues to struggle every day, every hour with the loss of something that she can never get back.
And she's holding that sweatshirt.
Yeah.
What meaning does that have?
The sweatshirt for us symbolizes her son's presence. He passed away or was killed in that sweatshirt in our story that we've created. And so that's like the last bit of him that she can still hold on to. His body is buried, but that still smells like him. It just feels like him. So that was the last thing she saw him in. And so she keeps that at very high symbolism for her. She keeps it on a couch, and she constantly is gravitating towards it.
Well, we're living at a time where Black Lives Matter has become, fortunately, part of the zeitgeist, and many people are working for more justice. And the Sorensen Center for International Peace and Justice, where I work, is based at CUNY Law. And as you know, some of my colleagues have been working on the disproportionate treatment against communities of color for conduct that's not policed in more privileged neighborhoods, and are working for change in a system. What do you think that dance, though, brings that's different?
Movement in general, I think that it provides a different perspective. It allows audience members to be taken on a journey that perhaps they would not otherwise get to see. We often see and read, articles or hear of things on the news about what's going on, but to be able to see this being told through movement, I think is very different and creative in the sense of it allows you to kind of feel an emotional attachment on a greater level than you would just reading something. Being able to see someone and feel their experience and see them crying on stage, to feel that, I think is very different than a two-dimensional screen.
I also want to get in some information about your other projects. So Nelson Mandela, we have an anniversary of 100 years, the day he was born, coming up this month, next week.
Next week.
And tell us about why you chose Nelson Mandela for a performance?
So Nelson Mandela was one of the world's greatest leaders, and it just so happened that this piece of music written by a composer, Carmen Moore, it just so happened to fall into my lap, and it was entitled Madiba, and it was about the story of Nelson Mandela's life. Part of the Black Iris Project's mission is to not only create works that reflect Black history or Black culture, but also to promote and elevate Black creative artists. And so for me to stumble upon this Black classical composer, and he wrote this amazing score for full orchestra, I immediately was like, can I sit down with you and talk about my idea and my vision? My vision was always to create ballets that reflected our culture, but I didn't want to tell stories that were often commonly told. Often Black History Month comes along in February. We always hear about Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. and certain other historical figures. So I wanted this to be an opportunity for people to learn a little bit more about Black history and Black culture outside of Black History Month, and perhaps stories that were not commonly told. So Nelson Mandela was a figure that, for me growing up in middle school and high school, I knew very little about him. And I feel like he was very little talked about. So I was really excited about the opportunity to get to share his life journey on stage through movement.
And that will also be performed.
Yes. So Nelson Mandela turns 100 years old on July 18th this year. And we're really excited to bring this ballet back to the city as part of our August 16th performance.
Great. Can we kind of delve into your ambitions and wishes for the years to come?
Yeah, of course.
Give us a peek inside.
So the next ballet that we're working on is a ballet about Harriet Tubman's life.
Harriet Tubman.
Harriet Tubman. My dad passed away 2 years ago, and he owned a large amount of land in the South, in Alabama, where he grew up. And so I've inherited that land along with my mother, and one of the things that I've wanted to do for a long time is find a way to kind of pay tribute to him and to the land. And so I thought it'd be really great to film a dance film about Harriet Tubman's life on the land. So we would actually go through the woods and work through the trees and hopefully work with like a Steadicam operator. Our collaborative, we of course want to create works that are accessible on stage, but especially wanting to create opportunities to allow people to view our works from the comfort of their own home so that they can still find more about Black history and dance and ballet and how we merge them together.
Fantastic. And a woman, too, and conductor of the Underground Railroad
Yeah.
and the safe houses through. Where is the land exactly?
It's just outside of Montgomery, Alabama.
Okay, where Brian Stevenson and team opened the
Yes.
National Memorial
Yes.
for Peace and Justice.
Yes, I'm hoping that there might be some opportunities to collaborate with them as well.
Fantastic. In the video, you mentioned some of your seed support and funders, and I'm just curious how you accomplish so much right now with this small team, and who's supporting your work, and what needs do you have to grow?
Definitely financial needs. You know, we've been able to get some seed offerings from the Rockefeller Brothers Fund and the Ford Foundation, as well as another foundations that I've poured my heart out to and shared of them my mission for social justice and social equity or racial equity. But yeah, we always need financial support. As a newer organization, we are not eligible for some of the bigger foundation grants. You have to have at least a track record of 3 to 5 years and tons of reviews and lots of press and just a proven track record of success. And so we're still building that track record to get to that point. So financially, it's always a struggle. But I'm always cold emailing people and meeting people out, introducing myself. I feel so strongly that this is a movement that we need to have right now, especially with the climate that we're in. Just being able to allow yourself to experience art or to even find an artistic discipline that allows you to cope and heal is so important.
Mm-hmm. As you're thinking ambitiously, where do you see yourself after Marcus Garvey Park? Are there
so the Black
or outside of the U.S. as well?
I would love to take our Nelson Mandela Ballet to South Africa. I've never been to South Africa myself, so I would love to actually go and see the historical landmarks that we feature in our ballet. I also want the collaborative to continue to grow and blossom, and for us to be able to travel around the country and the world to be able to share these ballets that we create. part of our initiative is to create one new ballet per year. And so I hope that 20 years down the line, we'll have 20 ballets of very diverse, backgrounded Black individuals that we can continue to expose and share with young people.
I just thinking that you also refer to yourself as an educator and a performer, as well as a choreographer. And we've been talking about your talents as a choreographer, but I just want to take a minute to talk about your life as a dancer and in Wicked and other performances, and also as an educator, because you have this other big life where you're inspiring young people and teaching.
Well, I started dancing at a really young age. My mom was an educator in the public school system for 40 years. And so she taught English and history, and from her, I really understood what it takes to be an educator. I saw her learn the floppy disk drive to the hard scan disk drive to zip drives to flash drives. She's constantly had to educate herself, and I've always been so inspired in the creative ways that she motivates her students to keep growing and learning as well as she grows and learns. And so I was on tour with Wicked. Wicked was one of my favorite Broadway musicals. It was my dream show that I've always wanted to be in. And I was in Louisville, Kentucky. As I was on tour, I would reach out to different organizations and just let them know I was in town. I love to give back. I love to teach and to go in, especially to communities of color, and just talk about my experience as a way to kind of motivate and uplift and encourage people that might be thinking about wanting to be performers. And so in Louisville, Kentucky, I reached out to the Kentucky Center where we were performing, and they gave me a huge plate of schools to go to. And I really fell in love with teaching and giving back in that city. And so I feel like all of these things Black Irish Project encompasses so many things that I love and so many things that I believe in, from education to performing to choreography.
Fantastic. I know we're going to turn for questions, but while people are thinking of their questions, I'll ask you a last question, and that is, who inspires you? You've mentioned your mother, you mentioned a teacher earlier, collaborators. Who comes to mind? Either those you've worked with closely or others in the world?
Donald Robinson. Donald Robinson was a dance teacher of mine from 7th grade to my 12th grade year. He really taught me so much about just being a human being in society, and I feel like a lot of the lessons that he's taught me have stayed with me even still today on a daily basis. One of the lessons that he taught me was that discipline is doing what you know you're supposed to do, even when no one's there to make sure you do it. And that has really stayed with me every day. I feel like without his teachings, I may not be where I am right now because of so much that he's ingrained and invested into my life as well as so many others.
Well, I think your discipline is so obvious given all that you've accomplished in this short time. Do we have any questions? Great.
Should I go to the microphone?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
You can go to the microphone.
Okay. Put it down a little bit. So, as you mentioned earlier, grieving is often a very private process that is unfortunately faced on an individual level. I imagine it's very difficult to represent that visually for a broad audience. You mentioned also your own experience with your father passing. How did you go about researching how best to represent grief on stage and respect the experiences of so many mothers who unfortunately have had to go through it?
It's been a challenge. We did a lot of research, whatever I could do scholarly in terms of pulling up articles or interviews with different mothers and trying to find a way to capture the essence of their feelings and based on what they've told us. But really, a lot of it was looking at the people closest to me. So my mother, my boyfriend also, as I was developing this whole ballet, my boyfriend had a very good friend of his that was suddenly murdered just after Thanksgiving. So to be able to evaluate his grief process, as well as mine, as well as my mother's, but it's specifically the people outside of myself, it really inspired me. So I looked a lot about mannerisms. There's also a number of articles that have been done on various different stages of grief. And so I started to read up on that, as well as comparing, what stage of grief I thought I was in, as well as my family members. But it's been a very slippery slope. It's been very nerve-wracking because I do want to create something that's authentic. The biggest thing for me that I always try to stress to people is that it's a fictional story inspired by so many different mothers. I don't know anyone personally that has lost a child to police brutality or racially based violence in that way, but in just being respectful of these different mothers, I've tried my best to try to capture that in an authentic way by looking at purely nuance and mannerisms that can be shared through movement, because there's no spoken dialogue. But as Camille had mentioned earlier, there was a mother that actually came to our preview at the Bronx Museum of the Arts, and it was so rewarding to be able to hear her say, "I feel like you've told my story in a very authentic way." She was brought to tears. She felt like her son's spirit had brought her there. What Camille was talking about, the sweatshirt, she said that she actually had a sweatshirt that she kept up on her mantle for a very long time. So that was very affirming, but it's very sensitive, and we try to be as cognizant of all of the energies that we could receive based on what we're doing.
And in terms of how you work with a dancer, with Courtney Celeste Spears in this piece as the mother, how did you communicate with her about grief, and how did she draw also on not only the research that was done, but on her own experience?
Yeah. She had just lost a friend, I would say a week after we started working on the ballet. She had lost a friend. And so literally when it came down to choreographing the very beginning of our ballet, I said, well, when you found out that your friend had passed away, what did you do? We literally walked through her process of, okay, so you walked in your house, what was the first thing that you did? And it was really hard for her. She didn't want to go there at first because she was like, I'm probably going to break down and cry. And I just said, it's okay, this is safe space. We always consider the studio to be safe space and sacred space. And so we cried. We cried together. Like I said, I evaluated her journey as well as the journey of those around me, and we tried to piece this together that way.
More questions?
Hi there. I have a question about the writing process. You talked a bit about your inspiration, about the music that inspired you, about the artist that inspired you. I'm curious whether during the process of rehearsal, working with the dancer, or even through previewing it, you've made changes to the story, or you've otherwise introduced adaptations.
Absolutely. A big part of choreography and creation, I think, is the editing process, just like as a writer would write a book, being able to look at your work. We showed it at the Bronx Museum, and being able to take a look and take a step back and say, okay, what worked, what didn't work? Mm-hmm. One of the things that we really kind of looked at was how the story progresses. Does it progress too fast? Does the dancer have enough breaks? And how can we, it's 38 minutes and it's one dancer, she never leaves the stage. So in looking at that process, there was a lot of kind of stepping back. We also had a survey monkey that we did at our first performance, or our first preview performance, where we allowed people to give their feedback written as well as verbally to let us know, how did this make you feel? Were you uncomfortable? Were there things that you wanted to know more about? Were there things that you wanted to see less of? All of that really informed my process moving forward, and I think that by the time we get to the stage on August 16th, it will be the fullest and richest version of what we can present.
Other questions? While people are thinking, August 16th is going to be at 7 p.m.
Yes.
Outside.
Yes.
Will there be any kind of talk back, or is it the two performances together?
It's just the two performances, so it'll be the Nelson Mandela work entitled Mediba, followed by a brief intermission, and then a Mother's Rite.
Okay, great. And how many dancers are involved
In the entire program, there's 17 dancers. So we're
Fantastic.
excited. Our collaborative brings in professional ballet dancers from all around the country that dance from San Francisco Ballet to American Ballet Theater to New York City Ballet. So it's really great to be able to have an opportunity for them to create a tighter sense of community amongst the Black dancers at various different companies, as well as being able to share our works for free or very low cost.
And I noticed you call it collaborative rather than a company.
Yeah.
And how do you find dancers? Or do they find you, or is it a combination?
You know, it started out as some dancers reach out to me now. They send me their headshots and resumes, but it literally started out as just a group of friends that never really get to dance together, that we were like, let's come together, let's create some dance, let's work. And
Okay, any dancers out there?
we're always, you know, I consider it a revolving door of dancers. We're always open to more people joining, and it's all based on the project that we have. And all of these dancers dance full-time for other companies, which is why we call ourselves a collective or a collaborative, because we're a seasonal organization. We typically work during the summer months when, you know, kids need something to do. So we want to be an outlet for them to be able to come in and see some dance.
Great. Other questions? It's a shy audience. Well, while you're still thinking, is there something that I haven't asked you that you would like to talk about? I'm curious is how we were so lucky to get you here in New York when you're from California originally.
Yeah, so my parents grew up in the South. They grew up in Alabama, and they grew up in very large families. And my parents decided that when they got old enough, they were going to move to California. They wanted to do something totally different. They grew up very poor, and my dad said, you know, I want to make my child accessible. I want him to have access to all the things that I didn't have access to, because who knows where my life and my career could have gone had I been exposed to things at a younger age. So I started playing music at the age of 5, played the violin. At 5, I carried that all through high school, and then I added on the piano and the flute. I played for the San Diego Youth Symphony Orchestra. But dance and theater was the biggest passion of mine. My mom took me to see Phantom of the Opera on tour when it came to San Diego, and I was completely enamored by the whole experience. And I looked at my mom and was like, I want to do this. Didn't know I could make a living doing it, but I just knew that I wanted to be a part of that experience and feel that energy. Even at 8 years old, sitting on the edge of my seat with the binoculars glued to my face, I really wanted to keep finding a way to have that energized feeling. So naturally, moving to New York, Broadway, you know, the capital of Broadway in the United States, it was a natural progression. I attended the Ailey School's Fordham University college program, which is a 4-year degree program, and started auditioning right away after I finished. So I've been really grateful and blessed to have been able to see some of my wildest dreams come true in these past 13 years in New York City.
Well, I'm sure your mentor and your mother and your father would have been so proud, and we're all so proud at everything you've accomplished, and we look forward to more. If you aren't in town in August, we'll stay tuned. People can go to your website,
Yes.
which is
blackIrisproject.org.
Great, and we hope to feature you at the Sorensen Center at CUNY Law at some point and other places during your world tour.
I had one more
Great.
question. Do we have time for one question?
Oh, yes.
Great. Hi. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
I was really intrigued by what your dancer said about how, you know, for 20 minutes there's this lone performance, right, that really can be uncomfortable, I think, for some people to watch. Were there other works of art that inspired you in that sense, like a performance, dance, or even performance art, where it's one performer really demanding that attention?
I had never seen, I've seen plays with one person as a child, but I had never seen a dance performance this long as one person. Alvin Ailey's Cry, it's a very historic, it was a tribute to his mother. I think that ballet is probably somewhere around 8 or 9 minutes, but something of this length, and then it kept getting longer and longer because I couldn't do the math, apparently. I was trying to add up the different sections, and I kept missing things, and then I was like, by the way, I think this is 40 minutes. It was terrifying. It was really terrifying. I said, who would want to dance this? Who would want to be on stage for 40 minutes long. So, but it was just a constant communication between myself and the dancer saying like, how do you feel? I remember we did a run through of the first 12 minutes and she was like, that was 12 minutes? It felt like 4. So it was a very collaborative experience, but no, I had never seen anything like it before. And I think that that's the reason why I wanted to do it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Great question. And Courtney really, when she described she felt engulfed by it, I have to say, just watching that performance that I saw, I really felt that the whole audience was engulfed in her. And it's really a very beautiful and powerful experience. So I hope many of you can see it. And thank you.
Thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Well, thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.